And I truly believe that transitions and taking risks are holy because they are a mirror to all of the places that we haven't been wanting to look. And so if we allow transitions to land deeply in our bones, what we will find is a whole new level of complete and amazing, wonderful resilience and strength and honor and dignity and capacity to get the life that we want. Hey everyone, I'm Thais Sky. Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women by women on conversations that matter. Hello everybody, Thais Sky here. I am recording a special little situation, an additional bonus episode for you all this week. And maybe if I'm feeling ambitious next week and the week after that. I'm envisioning this being a 3-part series, but let's not get ahead of ourselves because I've been wanting to record this episode for 2 weeks now and I'm finally getting to it. So I can't make any promises. Maybe it'll just be a standalone, but maybe not. We'll see how it goes. But here's the thing. I've been navigating some massive transitions in my life. I recently broke off a 5-year relationship and moved out of the apartment that we shared for over 3 years and became nomadic for a while. In fact, it was just yesterday that I signed a lease for a new apartment, which is very exciting. But yeah, lots of transitions. And I've asked my community on Instagram, what questions do you have around transitions? Do you have any questions around transitions that I can support you with? Do you have any questions around taking leaps? And you all have responded in a really big way. And it sounds like many of you are in a space of wanting to take a big action, wanting to take a big leap, wanting to enter a transitory period, and you're experiencing some doubts. So I'm just going to talk to you about some of my thoughts around taking leaps and transitions. And this episode is called How Do You Know When It's Time to Walk Away? And I'm not just talking about relationships. I'm not just talking about jobs. I'm talking about anything that we are required to walk away from. The thing that's scary about walking away from something is that we know how good it is right now or how good/bad it is right now. And walking away is a risk. We don't know if it's going to get better or if it's going to get worse by walking away. And walking away requires our own action, right? Walking away means that we said, yes, I'm leaving. And so there's some components to that I think is important that we talk about. And maybe this will just feel like a soothing balm of in your life of, wow, I'm not alone. That's what I'm trying to say. I want this to feel like you are not alone, that there are other people in the world who are experiencing something similar to you, and they're making it through on the other side. And I'm, special and not special. And if I can make it through to the other side, then I think you can too. So let's get into it. How do you know when it's time to walk away? A little bit about the ending of my 5-year relationship. I don't want to divulge details of our relationship for, respecting his privacy, but what I will say is that it's not that the relationship was awful, right? Sometimes I think it's easier to walk away when things are really shitty, when things really suck, when it's so obvious that you're so unhappy and that something's got to change. And so you get up and leave. It's a lot harder to talk about walking away when things are trucking along. They feel kind of fine. They feel sometimes even kind of good. And I think that's where a lot of us are. We're just chugging along. And if you are in a long-term, more than 3 to 4 year relationship, you know that after a while you fall into a very similar routine and pattern. And for the most part, things felt really good between me and my partner. It's not that things were terrible. And I had this sense, this tiny little sense that maybe it wasn't all that good either. And it's hard for us to trust this sense that maybe we could do better. Like maybe life can be better. I think it's very audacious to believe this tiny little inkling of a thought, because who are we to demand that life be better for us? Who are we to demand that things are fine now, but we want great? We want fabulous. So of course, when we're talking about how do you know it's time to walk away, we inevitably must talk about the worthiness wound. We must talk about this place within us that feels like, I should be okay with this. Most people would be fine with this. Most people would be grateful for this. So I need to find a way to be grateful for this and just kind of suck it up, and find the good in it. And so we use a lot of that language as justification for not really acknowledging that there's a space within us that really wants more. Here's where things get even more complicated, though. We all have a place within us where we kind of secretly want more. And sometimes we've taken action from that place and we realize that, actually, the bigger TV that I just spent $1,000 on because I kind of wanted a better TV even though I didn't really need it, not really worth it. Or maybe you got a promotion and you thought this promotion was going to be the promotion and everything was going to change after this promotion. And then you got the promotion and you're like, actually, I was kind of okay in that place, right? So we have these moments where we've taken some form of action from this small twinge of, I think I can do better, and then it didn't really end up working out, or it didn't really end up feeling the way we wanted it to feel. So now we're kind of regretting it. Maybe not regretting it, but you're kind of dubious about whether or not you should continue to follow this little pull inside of you. So listen, I get it. When it comes to walking away, it's complicated. There's literally nothing that I can tell you that's going to give you a black and white solid yes or no. And anyone who has the audacity to believe that they can give you the answers needs to be checked, because it's allowed to be complicated. When it comes to walking away from something, changing something, transitioning into something, taking a leap, it is complicated and messy. It's complicated and messy because you're changing things and you're stepping into new things and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to have regrets. I think any transition I look back on, I'm like, yeah, I have some regrets. I have some ways that I think I could have navigated this better, or I could have done this better. I don't think any transitory period is ever exactly the way we envisioned it. So let's release that right now. So I don't like to look at making decisions of, am I going to regret this? Because to me, that's not a very helpful way of thinking about it. I don't know if I'm going to regret it. I don't know what's right. I don't know what the right or wrong answer is. And thinking that making this decision will lead me to a right thing or a wrong thing is a little narrow in scope. And I think it really keeps us stuck. I think so many of us are so adamant about having our lives look right or be right. We want to be right. We don't want to be wrong in our decisions. We don't want to be wrong in our choices. But again, I don't think that this is a helpful narrative to even be thinking about any of this stuff from. I don't like this lens because I don't think anyone's life is right or wrong. I don't think any decision you could possibly make is either a right one or a wrong one. There's just decisions and the consequences to those decisions. And thinking about it as right or wrong, I think keeps us really stuck. It keeps us thinking very binarily that our lives are either going to get better or worse. But we know that it's going to be both. Walking away from a relationship is going to elicit a lot of feelings of missing, of sadness. It's going to make you think a lot about the good times in the relationship. It's going to make you think about all the things that you wish you would have done or done differently. Those are inevitable parts of walking away from a relationship. That doesn't mean that it's not right to walk away, right? Quote unquote right. You may walk away from a relationship and realize, damn, I really love that person and I shouldn't have walked away from that. And if that's where you find yourself, then you get to make another decision, right? So that's not a wrong choice. Walking away and realizing, oh, I actually wish that I didn't walk away doesn't mean that you made the wrong decision. It means that now you know more about what you want and don't want. You're getting more and more clear, and now you get to decide what you're going to do with that information. So do we see that? Maybe it's time to retire this right or wrong binary. You don't know if you're going to make the right or wrong decision. And in fact, it doesn't matter if you make the right or wrong decision. You got to make a decision, and then you're going to see what's happening. And then you're going to make another decision. And this is life. You're going to keep making decisions, and you're going to keep moving forward, because there's no moving back in time. So there's really no moving back. A lot of my clients come to me and they're frustrated because they feel like they're not advancing on their healing journey as fast as they want to be. And I often say to them, I think you're looking at healing like it's one direction, but it's actually more like a spiral. We have the opportunity to revisit some of the same patterns, but from different perspectives. You've traversed so much from where you were at the beginning to now. So even though you may be addressing the same behavior, the same consequence, you're now so much wiser, and you'll know how to navigate it in such a different way. So I think removing the pressure of right and wrong is a really great place to start. How do you know when it's time to walk away? Well, at least acknowledge for yourself that you're never going to fully know. And it's never going to feel fully right. And it's never really going to feel fully wrong. It's just too beautifully complex for that. Okay? You're never going to really know. I know that a lot of times we wait until we feel things with absolute certainty, until we're 100% sure. But that's also an illusion that's keeping us indecisive. And I think there's almost nothing worse than being indecisive. There's nothing worse than teetering, because you can't really grow if you're teetered, right? Like if you're like stuck on the, not the merry-go-round, what's the thing that like bounces back and forth that you sit on? Oh my gosh. I don't even know. But when you're balancing between two things, you can't really plant and grow. You can't, a seesaw, there it is, a seesaw. When you're on a seesaw with somebody else, you can't really ever feel grounded, right? Like you are constantly going up and down, up and down, up and down, in or out, in or out. Make a decision, for the love of God, make a decision. And then know that you will be able to handle the consequence of that decision. How do I know this? Well, I know because I know that you're a lot more resilient and a lot stronger than you think you are. So make decisions, my love. Make decisions. Get out of the murky middle. Allow the complexity of life to pull you forward. But being indecisive can be really painful. It can be really painful because nothing can grow from that place. So something that's been interesting that's been coming up for me, around taking leaps and risk taking and moving away from something that it just wasn't working, but it wasn't broken, right? Is that I've recognized where I generally have a fear of endings. And this stems from moving away from Brazil and moving to the United States and having to say goodbye to my family and not knowing when I was going to see them again. And then going back to visit, over the summers and then leaving and really not knowing when I was going to go back and see them again. I never really know when I'm going to go back to Brazil. In fact, it's been 6 years, the longest that I've ever been away from Brazil. And I didn't know that when I left the country 6 years ago. So I've never really known whether or not I was going to see my family again. And so I've developed an aversion to goodbyes. And this quarter of grad school, I'm in grad school for psychotherapy, and we talked about terminating our work with our clients. And I had to write a reaction paper on some things I was reading about termination. And one of the things that I really felt viscerally aware is how it's not only just goodbyes that I don't like, but it's also endings. I avoid endings like the plague. And so when I look back in my life, I recognize how most things that have ended in my life, friendships, relationships, college, high school, all these kind of big endings, didn't happen on my own volition. It was some external force that really pulled me into that ending. And so because I hate endings and I have an aversion to endings, I kind of self-sabotage and find ways to end things without ending things, right? So I start pulling back, or I look elsewhere to get my needs met from the relationship, or I numb out. I just find ways to kind of check out. And then eventually it's then the partner or the person kind of forces upon me that, hey, listen, your behavior isn't okay. And then that kind of drives me to end things, or them end things, depending on the situation. I'm sharing this because it's been really imperative and helpful for me to know these patterns during this cycle of termination and walking away. Knowing our patterns can be really helpful for us to see the ways that we've behaved in the past and maybe start to infuse something different now. Maybe we get to terminate or walk away or take this risk in a slightly different way, but we can only do things differently if we're really fierce about looking at the past. I have one of my specialties in my coaching work is addressing and breaking patterns. So I see patterns in my life everywhere. And I'm telling you, the more you know yourself, the more you know the patterns and the unconscious reasons why those patterns play out in your life, the more freedom you're going to have to change the pattern, name the pattern, know the pattern, and do something different. Patterns are addictions. They're ways that we stay unconscious. There are ways that we keep creating the same events over and over and over again, and they can really hurt us and hurt those that are around us. So naming our patterns, recognizing it, and then slowly doing the work of changing patterns can be such liberatory work, because we're basically demanding of ourselves that we choose something different. And so for this particular transition, knowing this pattern and getting super support with therapists and friends on how to make sure that the patterns that I've played in the past don't replicate itself now has been so helpful in my walking away journey. And so I just wanted to share that with you in hopes that maybe that will land with you, and maybe that will give you some homework or some things that you can explore and do before you take that big action that you've been wanting to take. To really ask yourself, when have I taken this big action in the past or something similar? How did it play out? What were my behaviors around this decision? What do I typically do? Why do I think that is? What may be unconsciously here? These are just a little bit of some of the questions that you can ask yourself. The other thing that I want to talk about that I think is helpful for us all to keep in mind when we're navigating transitions is that we each have our own risk template, which means we each have a different metric for how much risk we can take on. And so let's be conscientious of the fact that we each have our own risk template. And that means that just because you're willing to live with more risk doesn't mean that somebody else, a friend, can live with the same amount of risk. When I quit my full-time job and moved across the country and started my business, I put on a lot of risk. And at the time, that was the impetus I needed. I needed to put that much stress and pressure on myself to really move me into my business. But for other people, that type of risk is so debilitating that they can't even think, let alone grow a business, right? So just because I was able to, break off this relationship and move out of my apartment and not know where I was going to land for 6 weeks and be nomadic around LA and really trust that something was going to come through, doesn't mean that the next person is able to deal with that much risk and that much uncertainty and that much unknown. And that's no judgment of their character. If you have lower or higher risk tolerance doesn't mean anything except that you have higher and lower risk tolerance. And knowing how much risk you can carry without letting it collapse you is helpful to know when you're navigating a transition or when you're about to embark on something new, like walk away from something that you've known. It's really helpful to also remember that you are stronger than you think you are, and honoring your limitations, honoring the fact that you are at this place in your life where you're not willing to be at a risk 10, let's say on a scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10. You're not willing to be at risk 10, and that's okay. That's where you are. Like, honor the fuck out of that. Know thyself is such a brilliant way of really sitting with the fact that this is where we are, and can we be okay with it? Can we be okay with the fact that right now we have a low risk tolerance? Or can we be okay with the fact that we tend to take greater risks? Greater risks come greater rewards, but it also means greater risks. And that means that sometimes we fall on our faces, and sometimes we have to put our tails between our legs and like ask, the people in our lives for support in some way that we didn't really want to. So know your risk template, or at least have that be in the back of your mind, because when we know how much risk we can comfortably carry, then we can make greater, judgment calls that are going to be more conducive to our mental health. And mental health is so important in transition. Knowing how to honor our anxiety, our, depressive tendencies, our feelings of overwhelm is so critical when we're entering transitions. And this kind of is a perfect segue to my final thought of this mini-sode, which is when you're in transition, when you're walking away from something that has been very familiar to you for a very long time, just try to give yourself a lot of permission slips, okay? Because you're not going to show up in the same way that you were before the transition. In fact, a lot of things are going to go wrong. You're going to miss a lot of things, miss deadlines, or forget things, or sleep a lot. I mean, there's a lot of behaviors that you're going to exhibit during this transition, during the walk away or taking leap or taking a risk phase, that may feel uncomfortable for you because you thought that this wasn't your pattern of behavior anymore. There are so many unexpected expenses that came up for me during this time because I was scattered. I missed deadlines and had to pay overcharge fees. I had to pay for things that, like, looking back, I didn't really need. There are so many things that I've let slip. There's people who I still have voicemails from who I haven't been able to get back to because of everything going on right now in my life. And instead of being apologetic to the world and feeling like shit, I've just really claimed a big permission slip that, like, right now, this is okay. This isn't who I am. This isn't how it's going to be forever. But right now, this is where I'm at. And can I be okay with that? And can I honor the fact that, like, I'm a really imperfect human being? And that's just where it's at, right? Like, why do we demand that we move through transitions with this amazing amount of grace? When I first broke up with my partner, I reached out to my friends, my support system, and I was sharing with them how surprised I was that I wasn't going through the grieving process in the way that I thought my grieving process was going to look like. I've been doing a lot of grief work. I took a lot of classes on grief and supporting people move through grief. It's a subject that I hold very tenderly, that I love very much, is to support people navigating their grief. And so I'm familiar with what the whole process typically looks like. And I anticipated that that's how it was going to look like for me. I anticipated that it was going to look like a lot of, moments of complete despair and tears and just this complete spiral. And that's not what happened at all. My grief has looked very different than previous breakups and different than what I thought it was going to look like. And when I told them that, they reminded me what I'm reminding you all, that there is no cookie cutter step-by-step process on how to navigate walking away from someone that you loved, or a job that you loved, or your hometown, or whatever it is that you're walking away from. There's no template. In fact, the 5 steps of death and dying, DABDA, right? Denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, that's been debunked. Grief doesn't look like that. Grief can look like a lot of things. And so again, can we give ourselves a big permission slip for having our process look the way it looks? Trusting that our process is going to take us to where it needs to go. Trust that we're doing the work. We're looking at our pain. We're holding space for ourselves. And so whatever shows up, shows up. And sometimes it's going to look really heavy and really overwhelming. And we're going to feel like we have to have our shit together and we don't. And we feel like a mess. And other times we're like, wow, I really have my shit together. I thought it was gonna look messier than this. And that's totally awesome too. It's totally okay. Grief and transition, taking risks, taking leap, all of this is not easy, which is why so many of us choose to stay and stay and stay. We stay because we think that we can't handle it. We stay because we're scared of uncertainty and being uncomfortable. We stay because we think that this is as good as it's going to get. And at the same time, life will continually invite us into our greatest selves. I truly, truly believe that. And I truly believe that transitions and taking risks are holy because they are a mirror to all of the places that we haven't been wanting to look. And so if we allow transitions to land deeply in our bones, what we will find is a whole new level of complete and amazing, wonderful resilience and strength and honor and dignity and capacity to get the life that we want. So just remember, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong anything. Let's remove the dichotomy from the conversation. Remember that it's going to look the way it's going to look and to give yourself a whole lot of space for it. Remember that everyone has their own risk template and that yours does not have to look like anybody else's, and only you get to decide how much risk you want to take on because only you are going to deal with the consequence of your life. You're the one that's going to have to wake up in the morning in your own skin. So you get to be the ultimate decider of your fate, of how you want your life to look like. And just know that at the end of every jump is a landing, right? So like this is not permanent. You will land. You will find what you will find the other side. Like the other side is inevitable. As I shared in the podcast episode earlier this week with Lauren, be after the crucifixion is the resurrection. After the pain is the light. After exploring our depths, we get to be shown a different level of light, right? Of healing. So just keep going. I believe in you. I know that this is hard, but you're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. You are stronger than you think you are. I'm so proud of you. And that's it. That's all I got. Hopefully I'll come out with a part 2 next week. I hope that this landed well with you. I'm sending you all my love, and I'll talk to you next week.